All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Brother Augustine channel. Today's interview is a man named Hara, who I met at the first Montana conference.
That's right.
Seems like a long time ago, doesn't it?
That's more than a year at this point.
Yeah. And we talked about many topics back in Montana. We talked a lot about music, relationships, and the like. But today we're here to talk about music because both Hara and I are musicians. And at the time, his musical past had been mostly stuff that I would have listened to in my secular days, but not so much my Orthodox days. And we will get into all the details as we go. But I want to start off by thanking you for being here and taking the time to chat with me and the audience today.
It's my honor. I'm just, happy to know that somebody wants to hear about the stuff I make. So.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, you sound a lot like The Weeknd, who was one of my go-tos back in my secular days.
I do get that.
So now that I'm, you're making it more orthodox, it's right up my alley. So I appreciate that. So why don't we start at the beginning? I like to ask my guests usually, what faith were you raised in, or were you raised in one at all? How were you raised religiously, spiritually?
Right. Yeah, no, we're all over the map here. My father, my biological father, was a Muslim, not devout or anything, but just culturally, right? So, I mean, the most that I learned about what it means to be a Muslim is we don't eat pork, right? I'd never seen him pray a salah, I'd never seen him give zakah, we never went to mosque or anything. When my parents got divorced, my mom sort of took us far away from the Islamic worldview, and she got into this sort of, pop spirituality. So crystals and palm readings and angels and all that kind of stuff. So if I was raised in anything, it's the New Age, really.
Gotcha. And where are you from, like nationally, to have a Muslim family?
So ethnically, I'm Assyrian, and my mom and my dad both are from a small tribal group in the south of Turkey called the Mahalmi, who are all Muslims. So my grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents, up until about 500 years back, at which point, they were Oriental Orthodox, but forcefully converted is the theory. There's not a lot of information on it. So yeah, south of Turkey, and then we migrated to Germany when my mom was 5, so I was born in Germany.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So when your parents, or your mom, I should say, turned away from Islam, I know there can be a great fear of apostasy from Islam because there can be consequences. Did you get any blowback from the rest of your extended family or from your Muslim community about that?
I mean, we certainly didn't talk to her parents anymore. So I probably spoke to my grandfather on my mom's side once or twice. I never met the ones on my dad's side, and then one day we just heard that he had passed away from lung cancer. And that was when I was like 11 or 12. So we sort of completely lost connection with that part of her family. My aunts and uncles on that side of the family were fine. There was no problem, but they're more like what you would call modern Muslims, I suppose.
Gotcha. So your mom is now New Age, crystals, I imagine, astrology, and maybe some yoga thrown in for good measure.
Right. Well, I've been, God willing, I've been working on her for about a year and a half, and I actually went to visit her in Jacksonville, and I'm trying to just sort of expose her to orthodoxy, and obviously with with the desire for eventual conversion. But so we went to this Orthodox Church in Jacksonville called St. Justin Martyr, which is great, OTA church, really like it. And I think she's been back a couple of times since I went there with her. So at this point, I'm not exactly sure where she stands faith-wise, but I think she certainly is really drawn to Christ as a figure, and I think that's the starting point for all of us.
Thank God, absolutely. So this is when you were a child, your mom becomes New Age. So when you were growing up, did you get into it like she was, or was it just kind of did she push it on you at all?
No. She's very, very respectful about that stuff. She just laid it out like, she would buy us little books and give us, I suppose, what you could call prayers. But no, there was never any force. There was always this very open space. And my mom's always been like that, wanting us to make our own decisions just because of how abused she was by this very religious worldview, which, of course, I don't think speaks to religions in general, just to Islam specifically. But I mean, my mom had a really hard time growing up that way, so she went completely the other direction and said, these are the things that I think are true, but I want you guys to make your own decisions.
Was your parents' marriage an arranged one?
I think there was an element of that. So there was certainly strong influence from her parents and his parents to make that happen.
Interesting. Okay. So you're growing up in this household. Did she get remarried, or are you raised now by a single mother?
She did get remarried after she divorced my father to an American soldier, actually, and that's how we ended up here. So he ended up getting redeployed back to Fort Bragg in Fayetteville.
Okay, so he was in Germany at the time, deployed to Germany at the time. Okay, interesting. All right, so now you're back in America. How old are you at this point?
15.
15. Now, the lifestyle you ended up getting into with all the stuff we can talk about, are you already in there at 15, or was that something that you started once you were already in America?
College. So I definitely was trying to, I was like straight edge all through high school, didn't want to touch alcohol, didn't want to touch drugs, started to get into rock music. And I think that sort of became like a gateway for me, if you will, where once I got to college, I was like, maybe I'll try these things. Maybe I'll try drinking. Maybe I'll try doing recreational drugs. And one thing sort of leads to another. And I think lifestyle then bleeds into theology, implicitly or explicitly. You just start to be attracted to certain things. And that's kind of how that played out.
So what kind of rock bands were you listening to that led you to experiment with drugs and alcohol? Talking like Motley Crue kind of rock, or
yeah, 100%. Like old school. Guns N' Roses was my favorite band all through high school. I must have listened to Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, I don't know, 200, 300 times, just back to back. And then, other classics like Led Zeppelin and Def Leppard, and I loved Iron Maiden, so all of the old school stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was raised on Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Queen's
Oh,
Reich,
yeah,
Black Sabbath.
So satanic, man. Once you know what to look for, I mean,
they're
not even coy about it.
No, and it's sad because I had two tour shirts because I've seen them twice, plus Halford once by himself. But the shirts are covered in occult symbols.
Yeah.
Even if his voice was just next level incredible, and they do have some great songs, I think. But once you know, and he does have some Christmas albums, weirdly enough, also. So who knows how he really feels. So where did you go? Where did you end up in college exactly?
I went to UNC Chapel Hill in North
Carolina.
You did?
Yeah. Okay, I actually lived in Nashville for a while.
Oh, nice. I'm actually going down there next month for my brother's bachelor party.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I worked out in the Blue Ridge Mountain Range and then in a psych ward, which was not a very fun job, but interesting period of my life, certainly. So you're in college now. Are you already a musician when you start getting into drugs? Okay. Yeah, what did you start playing or singing? Like when did you start?
I started on guitar. So I picked up the guitar when I turned 15, and I begged my mom to buy me a guitar. But I was always very, like I had phases. Like I would get into something, pick it up for 3 months, and then drop it. So my mom was like, do I really want to spend $70 on a guitar for him? Because, we didn't have a lot of money. But I kept bothering her. So she bought me the cheapest Target acoustic guitar with this, like the super thick action where you have to press the string so hard, So I practiced until my fingers hurt. And I was obsessed with that stuff. I didn't miss a day of practice for years and years. And did that for about 4 years until I went to college. And in college, I picked up a music minor with a focus on vocal performance. So I was taught to sing. I was never a naturally good singer. Like I sounded horrible. Thankfully, no one is ever going to hear those. Those songs are long gone. But 5 years of vocal lessons later, and now my voice is passable.
Someday, on deep into the path towards sainthood, when you want to build humility, you'll publish all those old recordings. It'll be your asceticism. That's why I'm growing my hair back out. No,
right, you are.
So you do all the instruments on your music now?
Yep.
Okay. And at what point did you start writing your own stuff? Because I think it sounded like you were just practicing back then, or were you also writing?
Very early on. So I started, as soon as I learned what a scale was and what chord progressions were, I started putting riffs together and writing lyrics. I wanted to sing in high school. I just wasn't very good at it. So I would write lyrics, and I must have, notebooks lying around that are just pages and pages and pages of lyrics. And you do that long enough, you just start to get good at putting words on paper. And so, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been writing since, I think, about 4th grade, not lyrics specifically, but just like getting published in the school literary magazine or whatever. And I got a songwriting book by, what's the dude's name? Jason Bloom. 6 Steps to Songwriting Success. Apparently it's a very well-known songwriting book. And I read through it and I was like, do people not know this stuff?
Right.
Like
Right.
it just comes naturally after a while. You listen to enough good music, I feel like you incorporate the
Exactly.
structures and the flow.
Exactly.
I can't imagine trying to learn this academically,
You pick it up through osmosis, right?
Totally.
That's the way I view. There's like the way I think about art is there's the artist and then there's the craftsman, and the craftsman is just the skill part, right?
Mhm.
Like how quickly, how cleanly can you pick? Can you sing the note on pitch? Are you
Yeah.
nasal? There's all the technical elements, and you'll have people who are world class technically are not artists, right?
Mhm.
Like if you think about opera singers, for example, they don't write music.
Yeah.
They sight read or they learn pieces that are composed by other composers. And then there's that side, the craftsman, and then there's the artist side. And that I think you learn it. It's not I don't think you sit down and learn how to make art. I think you observe enough beautiful art and you listen to enough of it and it like you said, it sort of just seeps in. You pick it up.
Totally. And people don't realize, I think, a lot of very famous, well-known pop singers, country singers, rappers, they're not writing any of their own stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There's the whole industry of people just pitching music to their agents,
Right.
for
Yeah,
their character that they play on stage.
there is a guy, and I think his name is Max Martin, but I might be getting that wrong, who basically single-handedly wrote every hit between like 1990 and 2010 or something. So like
Dang.
Britney Spears and Katy Perry and all of these names. And yeah, so it's people like that who write the music and they'll write it for your sound,
Yeah.
right? So they'll write the lyrics and same thing with Drake, right? There was that whole beef between Drake and Meek Mill because Meek Mill went on record with him and then later on went on social media and was like, guys, he doesn't write his own lyrics. And
Yeah.
like that's how he was ousted for having, I think, something like 32 ghostwriters on a single track,
Wow.
which is why it's all polished to perfection, right? You got 32 minds in there, and every single line is quotable because it's this sort of this marketing machine. And I'm not saying that I didn't like Drake's music, I certainly did, because if so many people writing it, it's bound to be good.
Yeah, I remember Justin Bieber's Baby, Baby, Baby. It took like 12 people to write that chorus or
Yeah.
something. Like there's a formula to it, and you have to be
Yeah.
careful, I think, like, because you have to write in the structure that appeals to the human mind and heart, right? You have to understand hooks and chorus and repetition, but you don't want it to become sterile. You don't
Yeah.
want to just be a robot. Like there are people, I forgot the guy's name. There was a very famous, Ralph Murphy, I think, actually was his name.
Okay.
You can find videos of him on YouTube talking about the formulas for success in music.
Really.
And I mean, the guy seems miserable. I mean, I think he's passed away now, but he seems miserable because I think all the I don't want to say magic, that's not orthodox, but you know what I'm saying, the magic of the music was gone, where he would say if you go through like all the hits from this year, they say the word you 7 times in the first 60 seconds, like really robotic stuff.
Hmm.
But it sells really well, so there's always that balance.
Yeah, it's learning what makes music appealing from an academic perspective. You have to balance it out with actually enjoying what you do, right? And like
Totally.
I'm in that place right now where I worked for 9 months on this record, and then once I released it, like that's when promotion starts, and that stuff is it's paperwork, it's business, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to just like clean up your advertisements and like make the social media posts and everything, and I don't enjoy that stuff. So I was talking to one of my friends about it. It's like, well, are you working on music right now? I said, no, I'm promoting. He said, well, do 50-50.
Hmm.
So it's good to learn how to make better music, even songwriting. Like if you want to study from an academic perspective, as long as you're not losing, like you said, the magic. I would call it maybe the wonder or the
Yeah,
childlike
better
mystique
word.
of it is that art is not it's not logical, right?
Hmm.
Art is it's transcendental. It is ineffable. And if you try to boil it down into a formula, then you become an entertainer, right? And I'm not an entertainer. I'm an artist. It's different.
Yeah. You know that Billy Joel song, The Entertainer? You ever heard that song? You should listen to it. It's about him wanting to be an artist and
Really?
basically the radio producers and publishers telling him, he'll say he worked on a song for 10 years and they had to cut a minute and a half out so it would fit on the radio, and how miserable he is about it.
Wow.
It's
No, yeah, that's
really,
exactly what I'm describing. Yeah.
yeah, I think you'd like that Billy Joel song,
Okay.
The Entertainer. I am the entertainer. I know just where I stand. Really self-aware, kind of upset about it. He's not thrilled to know his place in the world of Hollywood and music and everything.
And that's ironically that's art, is to be introspective like that, to be
Mm.
able to sort of wrap your mind around what your condition is and then sing it in a way where people will understand what you're saying. I think that's
Mm.
the bridge. That's the role of the artist, is and any medium, it doesn't matter, music, painting, sculpture, your role as the artist is to kind of bottle up the human experience, a particular human experience, and present it to people in a way that resonates with them. And I think
Totally.
that's what people find beautiful.
Yeah, and people want that. They want to know like your authentic feeling. Like, what are
Oh
you
yeah.
experiencing? So, like what you're saying with Drake, if 32 people are writing your songs, you know, the audience all the time they thought they were getting to know this guy through this expression of his life. Turns out he has nothing to do with any of this.
It's not real.
You know, he's this like half Jewish kid, grows up in a rich neighborhood in Toronto, singing about started from the bottom. The bottom of what? The upper class? You know, that's not a song that a sentiment that his audience is going to resonate with.
Exactly.
My dad only made $100,000 last year. You know, do you know what it's like to only have 3 cars in the driveway? You guys don't know what it's like down at this
Terrible.
bottom. I know, I know. So, how did you end up? So, you started experimenting with drugs and alcohol in college, as did I. As did
Yep.
I. I was also straight edge through high school. Never touched alcohol, cigarettes, nothing.
Hmm.
How did you end up from there into the place from which you expressed yourself in your earlier music? This place of what sounds like really kind of misery and
Oh,
emptiness.
100%, 100%. I mean, it was like, I mean, I was, thank God this didn't happen. I was on the edge of suicide for years and years. And I think it's the drug use, the promiscuity, and the music culture, the space that I'm in, right? It's not just, generic hip hop, straight hip hop. It's like the sad boy, melodic hip hop
Yeah,
space. And these guys are all sad. And I mean, think about these band names like Suicide Boys, stuff
yeah,
like that. So it's this ethos that starts to sort of seep into your brain. And when I was getting involved with drug use and especially sleeping around, which God forgive me has always been my sort of shortcoming, has been chastity.
yeah,
And once I started to get into that stuff mixed in with the music, then the theology it's like second nature. It starts to make sense to you. You see it. You're like, oh, this is what the occult says. Yeah, I feel that. That makes sense to me. And then you sort of become your own standard of truth. And I think that's kind of what happened with me. I was in college. I was trying to get laid. I was trying to get the next high, and somehow made it through without failing out, thank God. And all of that bottled up with, an unstable mental space and just a terrible, terrible spiritual life.
yeah. Now,
It's the same thing.
It is. It is. Now, tell me what you think of this theory. So, from the people I knew in the life that I lived, similar to your background, I never knew a promiscuous person that was also leading a sober lifestyle. Did you ever meet a promiscuous sober person?
No, of course
So
not.
here's my theory. Tell me what you think. My theory is that even if you are living like an atheist or an occultist or whatever, there's still a part of the human heart, of the human soul that on some level knows what you're doing is wrong. And so you have to kind of silence that small part of your conscience with drugs and alcohol. Even if
Yeah.
you're not Christian or don't believe in God at the time, part of you still does. What do you think about that theory?
Yes. I mean, I say something along those lines all the time, is that we all know it's wrong, because if you're an atheist or you're practicing the occult and your girlfriend cheats on you, you'll be upset. And you'll tell everybody else, like, oh, this girl did this, she did that, she did all these terrible things. I'm offended. You have offended me. You've done something that's objectively wrong. But then you never ask yourself, well, why? Why is it objectively wrong? So, right, and it's the news, right? It's the part of you that intuitively understands God's law, and you numb it. That's why we do drugs. That's why we do alcohol. That's why we sleep around. I mean, for me, especially, sexual promiscuity was always self-medication.
Totally.
The worse I felt, the more I would pursue women. And the funny thing is, when you're done, you feel even worse. I still remember one time, I ended up meeting this girl, and I ended up taking her home. And then the next day, I called my mom because, I'm in college and my mom wants to talk to me. And I always try my best to keep that relationship close because I love my mom to death. And she says, how are you doing? And I broke down crying. Like, is that the picture of a successful person? Like, I pursued this goal, I pursued this woman, and I achieved that goal, and my response to it was crying, was misery. No, so we all know it. People who, when I first became Orthodox, right, I took a year and a half where I wasn't on social media, I wasn't releasing music, nothing, and then I come back, I'm like, hey everyone, I'm Orthodox now. And I was the guy who was like, talking about Shiva and talking about like these Greek deities and even Satan, Lucifer, right? I had a song that was about the devil. I mean, I deleted that. And I went on my story and I went a whole rant. And I told my fans, I said, I want you to ask yourself, if you believe these things, if you believe in the occult, or if you don't believe in God, or you're working with crystals and all that stuff, I really want you to ask yourself, is this working for you? Because it isn't. I have never met a person who is into the new age who doesn't also have a strong interest in like mental health awareness and stuff, because they're always thinking about it, because they're always miserable. So those two things go hand in hand. Like, you don't walk into the average Orthodox church and ask people like, what's your mental illness, what's your mental illness, what's your mental illness, and they all have one queued up.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we don't have people in the Orthodox space who don't have mental illnesses, because we all do. But in the new age space, like, you go on Instagram, this sort of pop spirituality, and they're like self-care and self-love, and it's okay to cancel plans if you don't really feel like it. And this is how fragile you are as a person, because all of these demonic things, they're sucking the life out of you. And I know that because I was that fragile. Like I said, I was on the border of suicide, and it was a miracle. It was an act of God, like reaching down from heaven and saying, I'm not done with you yet. That saved me from that. And I just wish people would realize it.
It's really interesting. So you're living this life, you're a musician, music minor, sleeping around with women. You have all the things that a lot of young guys aspire to, and you're miserable.
Of course. Yeah.
Now, why do you think it is that young guys looking up to people, and not just you, all kinds of celebrities, right? They see all kinds of celebrities committing suicide, doing drugs, getting in car crashes, being alcoholics, and yet why do you think they can't quite make the leap from seeing that the materialism doesn't lead to happiness and stopping chasing after it themselves? You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're saying.
They see the outcome, but they still chase it.
I have no idea. That's a great question. I have no clue. I've never thought about it. It's that, like, we all see, what does the Lord say? You shall know them by their fruits. We all see the fruit, right? Like, and even all of these like celebrity relationships, and I don't keep up with any of this stuff, right? But like, it's like this person's dating this person. Now they break up, and now they're with this person. Now they have 2 children, and then they break up. And these are still our role models. Like, you want this to be my role model? And then, like, have you seen The Dirt, the Motley Crue biopic?
Yes, I did watch that.
It was really good. I mean, it's super degenerate, but it's so good.
Very degenerate.
And that scene where they're the drunk driving, and spoiler alert for everyone who hasn't seen it yet, but it's been out for a few years, so deal with it. They're drunk driving, and they crash the car, and the buddy dies. Yeah. Right? And like, these are the fruits of that lifestyle and that worldview. And for some reason, like, I don't think I'm a stupid person, but it took me 10 years to realize this stuff. I started to get interested in religion when I was 17 or 18, and it took me until 26 to start becoming Orthodox, right? And I was, Catholic for a while there, Protestant for a while there and stuff, but I was, messing with the occult and everything, and you just don't put one and one together. I don't know why. I have no idea. I'd love to hear your take on it. What do you think it is?
Well, I had you on my show to solve the world's problems, so you better shape up quick, man. We're already half an hour in.
Oh yeah, come on.
No, I think it's because the people that decide what gets promoted in education and media go really far out of their way to stop the gospel from being spread through these mechanisms. So if you're not, this is just my theory, if you're not raised with Christian parents, like I wasn't, I'm ethnically Jewish, I was raised in a Jewish, but really functionally atheist household, right, you're never going to be exposed to this stuff. I mean, the first time I can remember having a conversation with a Christian was when I was in my early 20s.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. Like, I'm sure I had friends that were Christian, but the first time I sat down and talked with them, yeah, I still remember the guy. Sadly, he's no longer Christian because he got in a marriage that didn't work out. A guy I worked with at Greenpeace back in my hippie days was the first guy, I think it was on one of our lunch breaks, where I sat down and said, so like, what is it that you actually believe? And I was probably 24, 25 years old at the time.
Wow.
So I somehow went through all of college, living the same life you're talking about. Like, when would I have ever been exposed to anything besides it? And it's not like they're going to teach you about this stuff. I mean, I went to UC Santa Barbara, which is known for being a party school. But if you don't go to a Christian college, it's not like there's going to be anyone there preaching to you or trying to bring it to you. And the sad truth, I think, is that there are forces that deliberately try to take the cross, take the Bibles out of schools, stuff like that.
Of course. And I made this observation, and I'm not the first person to make this observation, but I've independently made this observation as well, is that even when it comes to Christianity, all of the heterodox persuasions, so the Catholics and the Protestants and the non-Trinitarians and everything, people will like actively disagree and attack them, right? And we're just, we're debating our theologies, whatever. But then when it comes to the fullness of the truth, the Orthodox gospel, it's hush hush. Like, it's almost like the devil knows that we don't want to draw attention to this. So it's like America's best kept secret is orthodoxy, right? I was at like a dental appointment earlier this week, Tuesday, and I was talking to my dentist, and she asked me if I was Muslim, right? Because I wear a shamag still. It's just this, the checkered headscarf type situation, just for like sun and wind and stuff. And I came in with my shamag, and people will associate it with Islam sometimes. So she asked me, "You Muslim?" I said, "No, I'm Orthodox." And she said, "What is that?" And I like on her wall is like Proverbs 2:10, yada yada yada. So you're a Christian and you don't know about the Apostolic Church.
No, Americans don't ever hear about it, really.
Yeah, they don't. So yes, you're absolutely right. The devil and his minions are hell-bent on attacking Christianity in all of its strawman forms. So all of the heterodox persuasions, we attack those to say, oh, look how dumb this belief is. Like, how many times have you heard this absolutely blasphemous statement of, I don't believe in the white man wizard in the sky?
Oh, yeah. Like that's pretty much all of Twitter.
Yeah, like you can boil down 2,000 years of rich theology, the most brilliant minds in human history, to that statement. Yes, you 14-year-old, they, them, you cracked the code. 2,000 years of tradition.
Yes,
Let's
Reddit
pack
theology.
it up, boys. Yeah, we're out of here. I can't believe this anymore. Like, yeah.
Orthodoxy refuted.
And it's because people aren't confronted with that. And, I think I was in a similar position to you, where my first experience of any form of the gospel, because, in Germany, yes, I knew there were, like, people fall into two camps, Catholic and Protestant, evangelisch, katholisch. And I remember, like in kindergarten, they were like, which one are you? And I'm like, I don't know, I'll ask my mom. So I asked my mom, she's like, we're neither. And I was like, what? How is that possible? But so I knew what Christians were, but I had no idea what the teaching even was. So when I was 19, the gospel was explained to me by this wonderful group of Protestant men who lived, on my floor in the dorm sophomore year. And that was my first sort of like venture into Christianity, was this sort of like 1.5 year stint with Protestantism, like sort of like non-denominational Baptist leaning. And how can you be 19 and just hear the gospel? And it wasn't, obviously not the full gospel, but in your position even worse, 24. But apparently, like, we all see we see crosses everywhere. We see Bibles everywhere. They're in every hotel room in America, and we don't even know what it is.
No, and the only exposure I had to Christianity really was when it was being denigrated by TV shows and movies. Like in my pot-smoking secular days, like the show Lucifer. I loved that show. I watched every episode of that show until they made him gay or bisexual. I was like, oh, well, they just ruined this. Even in my degenerate days, I was like, this is a step too far. But, the stuff that would glorify, and it's interesting because they still use biblical themes and imagery in this evil stuff. It's just twisted to denigrate it. But I want to ask you more about this, because that was going to be my next question, was how you got exposed to Christianity. What was it these Protestants said to you on your floor, age 19, that got you, like, what hooked you? What was it they said that made you think, okay, let me hear what more of these guys have to say?
Well, to quote every woman ever, it wasn't what they said, it was how they said it.
Oh, I thought you were going to say live, laugh, love. I was like, that's not an answer.
No, it was how they said it. It was the joy of the Lord, right? And that's why there's I forget the name of the saint, but there is a series of books called Orthodoxy by Metropolitan Hilarion. It's like books 1 through 4. And in the first book, he has a quote from some saint, I don't remember who it was, and I haven't been able to find it since, who said something along the lines of, I would never dare to call someone who confesses Christ as king, I would never dare to call that person wrong. You're just imperfectly right. And I think these guys were imperfectly right. Like, yes, their theology is messed up and they don't have all of the tools we have at our disposal, namely the sacraments, baptism, chrismation, the Eucharist, and such, but they really love Christ. And this was me, like peak depression and very, very unhappy with my life. And I'm like, I want what they have.
Totally. I know
So,
exactly what you mean.
right? So I sat down with them, and a really good friend of mine, who I'm still in touch with, he had this group called Ultimate Matters, and he would get together a bunch of people, no matter what you believe, and you would discuss the ultimate matters, like what's the meaning of life? Is there a God? And I went to 5 or 6 of those, and it was just the way he loved everybody in the group. And one day I was like, I think I believe this. I think I actually believe that there was a man, Jesus, and that he died on a cross for me, and that I'm a wretched sinner.
Mm.
And that's how I got exposed to Christianity. And I was Protestant for about a year and a half, until I went down to Charlotte for a funeral. And I was staying with a friend of mine, and his parents are very devout Catholics. So we got to talking, right?
Mm.
And he asked me, what do you believe? And at this point, I identified as a Baptist. So I said, I'm a Baptist. He's like, okay, so you're Protestant? I said, yes. He's like, so you believe in sola scriptura? I said, yes. And I said, sola fide. Mm-hmm. And he says, what do you think about James 2:20? I was like, what does that say? I said, well, do you not see, you fool, that you are saved by works and not by faith alone? So here I am with my 3 brain cells worth of theology, and I'm like, wait, the Bible says that? Because I've never even read the thing, right? I've never actually made it all the way through, so I've never gotten to that verse. And it's such a small epistle too. And of course I would read front to back, right? So I'm in the Old Testament, churning through Kings and whatever, Hezekiah. And I'm like, well, hold that thought. I'll get back to you in about 3 months. So, I went back to Chapel Hill. I picked up every book I could on Catholic versus Protestant dialogue. I picked up a copy of the Catholic Catechism, the big green one, post-Vatican II, read the thing cover to cover, and became convinced that in the false dichotomy, but still, in the dichotomy of Protestant versus Catholic, it has to be Catholic.
Mm.
There is no world in which the Protestant theology is tenable. So
Yeah.
they became Catholic. But then, of course, that didn't feed me spiritually, and ultimately led to me falling away from the faith altogether, and then getting involved in the occult for real and Eastern spirituality.
So how long were you Catholic for before you fell away from it?
About a year and a half or 2 years, I want to say, because I was attending a Catholic church through the entire school year, and this was my senior year at this point. And by the time I graduated, I became a catechumen in the Catholic Church, right? After Vatican II, they instituted the RCIA, the Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults, which I actually think that process, the way they do it, is really nice, because it's very similar to our catechism, but with one caveat where when they say catechumens depart, the catechumens actually leave. You don't attend the second part of the Mass, and you go and they teach class. So I did that for a year, and then a week before I was going to be received into the Catholic Church, I dropped out.
So what were you seeking in Catholicism that you felt was not being provided to you?
I don't know if I can put a word on it. It didn't feel right. And then I started to justify to myself. I started making up reasons, which were the dumbest reasons. I was like, well, what about the gay people? Why can't they get married, or whatever? I was just grasping at straws. But looking back at it now, hindsight being 2020, I realized that it was because I didn't feel at home. I didn't feel like the theology made sense up here. And this has always been one of my huge sins, is I'm always living up here and never down here. But ultimately, the down here, the heart told me, you can't be here. So I left. And then I started from square one, and I started to get into everything. I studied Far Eastern spirituality, namely Kashmiri Shaivism, which is a particular small branch of Shiva worship. They're monistic in nature, so believing that God is everything.
Right.
And then the relationship that has to schools of Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, which is another Indian school of thought, and then the yoga school. And of course, Far Eastern spirituality, if you take it to its natural conclusion, will eventually lead you into the occult. Mm. And because Kashmiri Shaivites practice Tantra. And what is Tantra if not ritual magic? And specifically sex and death magic.
Yeah.
Right? Because these Shaivites, and even then I thought it was just absolutely disgusting. They'll practice ceremonies and sexual orgies and stuff in cremation grounds. Right? And the message, it is absolutely repulsive. Even then, I could not get behind it. The message is supposed to be, look, good and evil aren't real. It's a false dichotomy. It's Maya, right? Illusion. And ultimately, it's all God. And I will prove this to you by mixing sexual fluids with blood, with feces, with urine in a cremation ground. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I think the only thing you proved to me is that it was just as disgusting as I thought it was.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that wasn't tenable either.
Now, at this point, do you go back to your mom and say, hey, I'm into crystals and yoga now? Or, okay, so you did have the conversation about it. How did that go?
I mean, of course, she was, very receptive and everything. And like I said, my mom was always very open to whatever spiritual path we chose for ourselves. So when I would talk to her about Kashmir Shaivism, she'd be like, oh, that's really interesting. And she'd try to find connections to the things that she believes and was always, very supportive and everything. But I wouldn't say that, like me being an Orthodox person, when someone tells me I'm becoming Orthodox, I'm like cheering. And then when someone says I'm thinking about leaving the Orthodox Church, I'm like weeping. My mom, she was never like that because I think a lot of people who are into the New Age space are implicitly perennialists. So they don't really think about it, but they think, well, whatever you believe, as long as it's leading you on a path of like peace and love, or however you want to justify it, then it's all fine. Right? And you talk about this as one of the 4 points in your book, is perennialism as this sort of great big lie of, well, you specifically say Masonry. I think the devil is that he wants, oh, it's all fine. It's all true. It's all okay. Well, what you're really doing is you're disrespecting everybody now. Because if I told a Muslim and a Christian, you're both right, I just told the Christian, Christ is not God, and I told the Muslim, Christ is God.
Yeah.
Because they're both right. So I'm insulting both of you. So I'm sorry, pick one. But yeah, my mom and I, we've always talked about spiritual matters very deeply, and whatever my views were, I've always expressed them to her, and she's always tried to find common ground with the things that she believed. And I think her views have always shifted slightly, not a lot, but slightly based on whatever it is that I was reading at the time. And because she's always taken the things that I believe very seriously, and I mean, I love her for that, right? Which is, I think, why she even considered visiting an Orthodox church and has started finding some of it appealing to her, right? And there are certainly doctrinal points, and this is true for everybody's journey, that she doesn't agree with, or that maybe don't make sense to her. And sometimes I don't have the words to describe. For example, the fasts is one of the things that my mom doesn't understand. It's like, well, why are you not feeding your body the things it needs? And I've always been like, well, it's for like spiritual growth. You're denying yourself to grow spiritually. And she says, well, how? And then I don't have an answer. And I'm like, I'm not quite sure how to explain it to you. I'm not a theologian. But she's always tried very earnestly to understand what it is that I'm saying. And I mean, I love my mom to death. She raised 3 sons by herself as an immigrant twice over, right? First to Germany, then to America. And I love her.
Well, thank God. All right, I want to back up a second from this. So now you've left Catholicism, going to the occult, but I want to ask about the period during which you're Protestant and Catholic. During that period of time, did you find any relief from the suicidal ideation and depression that you had been feeling previously?
Yes, definitely. You can sort of draw this almost one-to-one relationship between how close you are to Christ and how absurd the thought of killing yourself seems. So when I was Protestant and Catholic, I might have felt bad, I might have felt upset and depressed, but suicide wasn't on my radar. But then when I would get into the occult, it was absolutely on my radar, and in some ways, I think even implicitly encouraged. Because if you believe in reincarnation, I mean, why not?
Yeah.
You're just like, this life's not working out for me. I mean, reset. I'm going to turn the PS4 off, turn it back on, and try again.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I've had debates with a couple Mormons, and I don't know if you know much about their theology, but they believe that the afterlife has 3 levels, all of which are better than our present life. They don't believe in eternal suffering and hell the way we do. And so I ask them, well, if the afterlife is better no matter what, why not kill yourself? And
Yeah.
they don't have an answer. So if you don't have like a well fleshed out theology and a coherent theology, it's not going to lead you to anything that makes sense.
And this is, I mean, that does sound quite antinatalist to me. Is essentially what they're saying is death is better than this.
That is totally what they believe.
So yes, the natural conclusion, which this is something you'll notice in a lot of people who aren't Orthodox, is they are afraid of the natural conclusions of their belief systems. Is they don't want to take it all the way. Like if atheists, for example, and Father Seraphim Rose's little booklet Nihilism. Talks about, it's like 110 pages. It's the first thing I ever read from Father Seraph. Incredible. And the way he lays out the, what is it, naturalism or humanism, naturalism.
I think vitalism.
Yeah,
next,
and then it's like nihilism and then solipsism. I don't remember the exact steps, but he lays out that, well, if you believe this, you really do have to believe this. And if you believe this, you really do have to believe this next thing. And then you follow it to the natural conclusion. You blink twice, and now you don't believe that things are real, period.
Yeah.
Right? Now you're Hindu. Like now you believe everything's an illusion again. It's gone full circle. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are afraid of their natural conclusions. I have a lot of friends who don't believe in God from, my old days, and I still keep in touch with them, and I love them dearly as people. And they do all of these good things. Like they care about like charity and taking care of their families and helping their parents and their siblings and all of those things. And I'm like, well, why? But why? Yeah. Like, because is and ought are not the same, and you don't believe in oughts. You can't believe in oughts because you don't believe in transcendental things. You don't believe in higher metaphysical things. But people don't want to go, to your point, people don't want to go to the natural conclusion. And it sounds to me like perhaps Mormons don't want to admit that if this is what the afterlife actually looks like, I can't be intellectually consistent and still be here.
No. I don't know if you saw my interview with Jeremy Firth, who was a Mormon convert to Orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. But we get pretty deep into the inconsistencies in their theology and stuff. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying now reminds me of what you said earlier about how can an atheist justify being upset that his girlfriend cheated on him? Because you're implicitly acknowledging there is an objective moral order.
Exactly.
Right? And if there is no objective moral order, then you have no right to be upset. But you know you're upset. You can't think yourself out of being upset about it. In fact, I even remember back from my polyamory days, there were whole books written about how to actually learn to take pleasure when your partner's with somebody else, because it's such an unnatural thing. Right?
You've got to be kidding.
Oh, no. I think they called it compersion or something. They made up some word.
No, there's a word for it, and it starts with a C.
Yeah, we got to drive out your jealousy and your anger. Like, they know that there's something inherent in us that recognizes objective moral order, right? Mm. And they'll argue, well, why is gay marriage wrong if it happens in nature? Well, rape and murder also happen in nature. So either way, their argument is not consistent, and they end up believing in God somewhere in their souls if they played it out all the way like you're saying. But that's terrifying, because if they play it out and God is real, then that means hell is real, means sin is real, and then that means I'm not perfect the way I am. The ultimate anathema to the American way of life, right?
Yes, you are not perfect the way you are, and that's okay. But the good news being that there is a God who wants to help you get there. Be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. It's not a suggestion, it's a commandment. Yeah. So why would the Lord command this of us if there wasn't a way to perfection? And there is, but it's through self-denial. Exactly. And we don't want that either. Because
it's not through affirmations and self-esteem?
No, affirmations, no.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, okay. I know. It's like I get so triggered when I think about them, because it's actually funny. Even in the clinical setting, they did studies that showed that positive affirmations backfire. If I don't believe that I'm beautiful, say, and I look in the mirror and I'm like, I am beautiful, I am attractive. In my brain, I'm like, no, I'm not. And then the cognitive dissonance starts to cause me pain.
Right, because if you were, why would you be telling yourself?
Exactly.
Why would you have to put the effort
If anything, it's just another weapon of the devil to try to get people to be mentally distraught. Yeah. How about looking in the mirror and saying, I may or may not be beautiful, whatever gifts God gave me, and that's fine. And that, I think, is a good place to be. I think that's what humility is saying, these are my gifts, not mine, right, given to me, and these are my shortcomings. And I'm okay with that. Like I said, for example, my mom has some theological questions about Orthodoxy I can't answer. It's my shortcoming. I'm not a theological wizard, and I'm okay with that. That's not one of my strengths. One of my strengths is I'm a solid musician, and I try to get Orthodoxy in front of people by art. That's my vehicle.
Amen. And we're going to get to that in a second. But you were just talking about weapons of the devil, mental distress. So that brings us back to your post-Catholic phase. You're deep in this stuff. How do you get re-exposed to the idea of Christianity now that you've experienced both forms of Western Christianity and decided that they were not providing what you were seeking there?
Okay, that's a great question, because it was actually the most fascinating story. So when I was growing up, I always thought I was Turkish, right? Because we're from the south of Turkey, we're Turkish. So I grew up thinking I was Turkish, and I spent my entire life thinking I was Turkish until I turned 23 or so, and then I did the DNA test. And for anyone who's listening, who's considering it, burn your email. So use something like Proton Mail on a private server, prepaid Visa card, and use a VPN when you order it. You do not want people being able to connect you as a person to the genetic information, and God knows what they can do with it in the future. So if you're going to do it, take some precautions. But I wanted to know, so I took the test. And lo and behold, I'm not Turkish at all, not even 0.1%. I'm 0.1% Korean, but no Turkish in me. So what am I? Well, I'm Assyrian. And I was like, what is that? So I started researching it. And then I started getting into like Assyrian history and everything. And what do Assyrians believe? Well, they're by and large either Nestorians or Oriental Orthodox or Eastern Catholics, right? So I found a church locally in Raleigh. It's called St. Charbel. And it's a Maronite church. And Maronites are this very weird flavor of Eastern Catholic, where pretty much every Eastern Catholic denomination, I'll call them denominations or churches, whatever you want to call them, are a schismatic group from an Orthodox church. So like Byzantine Catholics or Ukrainian Catholics or like Greek Catholics, like these are all schismatic from an Orthodox church because there was some squabble and they're like, well, we'll just rejoin with the Pope so I can be in charge. The Maronites are different. The Maronites were holed up in the mountains for 1700 years. And then one day just decided to come down and they're like, hey, guys, we're Catholic. And we've been Catholic all along. And apparently the Pope was like, that's fine, you know? So the interesting thing about them, though, is they're predominantly Lebanese. And about 10 to 15% of the liturgy is in Syriac. So I was like, this is the closest I'm going to get to being able to connect with my like ethnic heritage. So I start going to this church, and it's a wonderful church. Like, these are beautiful people. And Abuna Rob is just an amazing man. And I attended for about a year and a half without receiving communion. And that's how I started to get in touch again with Christianity. But now I had all of this extra metaphysical knowledge and experience that I've gathered from being Protestant, Christian, Far Eastern, monistic, occult, and all of it has sort of started to form my views. And I started to understand, well, what actually are the theological intricacies that make one belief system not work over another? For example, the reason I ultimately stopped believing in monism was if the substance of the universe is the same substance of God, then the universe has to be eternal. And because if the universe was created and God wasn't, then they must be separate. Because that is a fundamental feature of God that the universe does not possess. Now, the Hindus do believe in an eternal universe, so it makes perfect sense for them. But we don't. I certainly didn't. The eternal universe never made sense to me, especially with the Big Bang or whatever, even whatever scientific evidence people seem to conjure up. And full disclosure, I'm a young earther, right? I believe the Earth is about 7,000 years old, and I think that's what God sort of just plopped it down, as in like if it had developed for 13 billion years, what would it look like right now? It's like if I was writing a book like Lord of the Rings and I have 5,000 years of backstory in my head. I think that's what happened. But I know some people don't believe that, and I don't think that's necessarily dogmatic. You don't have to be Orthodox and be a young earther, but I am. But I still believe in a creation. And even before I was Orthodox and while I was into the occult, I still believed in a creation because like the prime mover argument, Aristotle's prime mover argument, which I know a lot of people don't like, it makes sense to me. I have a rational brain. So I'm like, well, yeah, if you trace back the chain of events, there is a first cause and he has to have no cause himself. So I started to understand why monism doesn't work. And then I'm in this Eastern Catholic Church, and now I'm looking at it from a new lens, asking myself not necessarily about which doctrines do I like or dislike, which is how everybody assesses religions these days. What does your religion believe about homosexuality? Oh, well, we don't support it. Oh, I could never be that. What do you believe about abortion? Well, we're against abortion. We're pro-life. Oh, I could never believe that. You're putting the cart before the horse. You have to ask yourself, what's the standard of proof? And then I have to form my opinions based off that. Because I used to believe in gay marriage. I used to believe in abortion. I used to believe it was fine. And then when I started to ultimately realize that the church has all authority, I started listening to the arguments and I became convinced that I was wrong about it. But I started to assess my Catholic, now Eastern Catholic beliefs from a new lens and started to realize that divine simplicity makes no sense. I cannot for the life of me imagine how anyone can say God has no distinctions and I believe in three distinct persons. How is that possible? God has no potentia, but at one point was not incarnate and now is incarnate.
Yeah, that's a big one for me too.
So that's how I came back in touch with to answer your question, with my Christian faith was actually through my ethnic heritage. But amazing how God works sometimes.
Now I got to ask, because so far we're talking about Protestant, Catholic, Eastern Catholic, Maronite, Orthodox, and a lot of this discussion has been about theology, doctrine, what makes sense to you, what doesn't. At any point in your journey, from all the way from when you discovered Protestant at 19 to discovering your ethnicity and doing all this, did you try to change your lifestyle to match the commandments at all, or was this still all an intellectual conversion?
Nope, not at all. That's a great question, and the answer is no. I always tell people, now that I'm Orthodox, this is the only belief I've ever had in my life that has actually changed me as a person, and fundamentally so. Because, I mean, we've talked about, I've been very open over the last 52 minutes of the interview and talking about my shortcomings and my sin life, because I'm trying to illustrate to people that God can take you from here to here. In like a year and a half. I mean, I made a complete 180, right? I don't really drink anymore these days, except for maybe a glass or two. I certainly don't touch recreational drugs. And I am deathly afraid of lapsing into any sort of fornication or masturbation or sexual promiscuity or anything like that. And always trying to keep myself very accountable, talking to my friends, talking to my priest. So Orthodoxy did that to me, but anything up to this point, I made a token effort at best, right? I have a girlfriend, I'm sleeping with her, she breaks up with me, I'm crying, I go to my friend who's a Christian, and he's like, well, you sleeping with her? I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, you're not supposed to do that. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll try. 2 months later, I'm sleeping with the next girl.
Right.
It never made a difference.
Interesting.
And
you were chrismated when? Very recently.
July 27th.
Thank God.
Actually, a month ago. Yeah.
Is today the 27th?
Sorry, 17th. Sorry, July 17th. So a month and 10 days ago. Yes.
What was that experience like for you?
It was mystical. It was otherworldly. It was, what's that really famous quote from the baptism of Kievan Rus? Is we knew not whether we were on heaven or on earth.
Yeah.
In heaven or on earth, something like that. It was like that. It was quiet tension, quiet weight. I didn't, get the Holy Chrism put on me, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing angels everywhere and the building's exploding and people are cheering. No, it was like your cells are vibrating, like there is pressure in all directions all at once, and you feel really present. It's almost like you're having an in-body, out-of-body experience. It just felt, I don't know, these are all just analogies to try to even approximate what it's like to receive a sacrament. It's life-changing, right?
Yeah. Now, I think I skipped a part of your story, now that I'm thinking about it, from you going to the Maronite Church to discovering Eastern Orthodoxy.
Right.
So how did that transition happen? Because now you've gone like the full spectrum of Christianity except for Orthodoxy.
Yeah, I never got into the non-Trinitarian stuff, thank God. But I did do most of the mainliners. I did do most of the
tour.
Exactly. Just one lap.
Yeah.
And the way I got interested in Eastern Orthodoxy again is actually quite interesting and not at all flattering of me, as most of pretty much all of this story has not been very flattering. But I was trying to find a way while I was in the Maronite Church to make some of my old beliefs work. Right? I was like, well, maybe people are interpreting the gospel wrong. Like maybe I, in my great hubris, will figure out what 2,000 years of saints haven't figured out. So let's get to work. So I started to dig into, well, essentially what are Christian heresies, right? And I was like, well, maybe one of these was correct. Maybe they missed something. Maybe the universe is God. And, when we say God is everywhere at all times, maybe that just means that, yes, my phone this is God. Hello, nice to meet you. And so I started to get interested in a particular heresy called Universalism, which, most people have heard of. Because if everybody, this is another belief of the Shaivites, is that I as a person actually am the fullness of God. I'm not like a splinter from God, but my consciousness is the entirety of God. Your consciousness is the entirety of God. This is God having a conversation with himself. So I thought, well, maybe that's, true. I would like this to be true. So then everybody would eventually have to return to God, be saved in Christian terms. So it's like, is that a thing? Looked it up. Oh, Universalism. Okay, that's interesting. What do the Catholics teach about Universalism? Oh, it's a heresy. Okay, well, what do the Orthodox teach about it? Because, I kind of knew about Orthodoxy. I've been reading enough theology to know that there's a schismatic Catholic church that doesn't use the filioque and has leavened bread, right? That's all the Orthodox are, right? Just those two things. And that's what I used to believe when I was Catholic. And I started to look into Universalism, and there was one guy in the online Orthodox sphere who does seem to say that it's not actually officially heresy. Like,
are you talking about that David Bentley Hart character?
No idea who he is. I forgot his name. This was like 2 years ago, but it's
he's
probably
like he's like the main guy promoting Universalism while claiming to be Orthodox. So it's probably him if I had to guess.
Okay. Yeah. So he has like this long blog post and it sounds very historical, very intelligent. And he's like, well, the council where people claim, and I even forgot which council it was, the council people claim that Universalism was condemned. These documents were potentially a forgery or shoved on the bishops by the emperor or something. And I don't remember what the argument was. I was like, oh, but this is cool. I can work with this, right? I can justify to myself. I can do enough mental gymnastics. I'm quite flexible. I can do enough mental gymnastics to now be a Christian and still believe some of my monistic Far Eastern metaphysics. So I decided to visit an Orthodox church. And I'll tell you the same thing I always tell everybody. The reason I came is not the reason I stayed. I walked in because I was interested in Universalism, and I never left because I was finally home.
Wow. How'd you know?
And the people, the body of Christ, right? It was my first real experience of the physical body of the Lord. I walked into this Orthodox church, and I'm a very eclectic looking guy. The lighting's not great, so you can't really tell, but I got the earrings and the nose piercings, and I got the tattoos and everything. I don't look like I belong in an Orthodox church. But I walked in, and these people, they don't see any of it. They don't see what I look like. They're like, oh, there's a fine young man who wants to visit an Orthodox church. They don't think twice about how you look. So I'm standing there at a liturgy, and I read an entire book. I always like to be prepared. I read an entire book on basic Orthodox practices. I don't even remember the name of it. But so I knew to stand. I knew to cross myself and touch the floor. I knew how to do the sign of the cross with the pinched fingers and everything. I just didn't want to look out of place. So this was during COVID times. And this is the church that I was chrismated in that I attend to this day. It's called Holy Transfiguration in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I walk in. I'm standing there. Everyone's social distancing. We have our masks on because the bishop sent those orders down to the priest. The priest, in obedience, did those things. So I'm like, fine, I'll put on a mask for this. I don't usually like to, but I will, just to be respectful of these people. So there I am. I'm participating in the service and everything. And towards the end, I can't quite tell if it's done yet, right? It's hard for me to tell because there was no oh, we're finished. So
they say, let us complete our evening prayer to the Lord.
And you're barely halfway done.
They don't tell you it's like 30 minutes from now. The first time I went, I was like, oh, good, this was getting long. And in 20 minutes, I'm like, we didn't complete anything. Why are we still here?
Exactly. It is the classic bait and switch. It's the Orthodox. We love to do this. We like to repeat ourselves. As my godfather, Father Andrew likes to say, when we repeat ourselves, we mean it. He's this very old priest and amazing man, great stories. And he if we repeat ourselves, we mean it. So when we are completing, we're just like, one more time, one more time.
Yeah.
So there we are. It's like an hour and a half into the service. Post-communion prayers are going on. So now I'm starting to wander around a little bit. I'm looking at all the icons because I'm an artist. I'm a very visual person. I love beauty, huge for me. So I'm looking at all these icons. And this little old lady walks up to me and she whispers. She's like, are you visiting? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, well, I hope you come back. Oh. And the way she said it, again, it's not what she said, it's how she said it. Because I could say that to anybody, oh, I hope you come back. No, but the way she said it, I was like, I turned to her and I was like, I think I will. I said it to her, I was like, I think I will. And then I came back. And then I came back again. And then one more time, and then one more time. And then I emailed the priest and I said, can I sit down with you? Can we talk about my theological questions. So I was, asking about like biblical canon and the filioque and just basic stuff, general stuff. But what I found was I was getting to a place where the resonance in my heart and my soul of being in the church was so powerful that I wasn't trying to figure it out anymore. God was just going to show me. And he did, right? I stopped trying to figure out what does the Orthodox Bible have 80 books and the Catholic 173 and the Protestant 166. I eventually met a priest who explained it to me. Like, well, concentric circles of certainty. The Gospels, 100%, of course, 100% that they're inspired. Then the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, definitely 100%. And then, we get into the epistles and then maybe like minor prophets, and then so it's a little fuzzy. Not quite sure. We're relatively sure enough to print them in the book. But, are we going to go out on a limb and be like, we are 100% sure that this is inspired? No, it gets a little fuzzy. That's why there is no like official list of what the Orthodox canon is. And that's why the book that's in the altar right now is just the Gospels, because that's ultimately all you need. There was some saint who said, if you never read anything else for the rest of your life except for the 4 Gospels, you have everything that you need to be saved. You don't need it.
Well, it's interesting. I haven't heard an Orthodox person say that regarding the canon, because from what I've seen in the 4th century, Athanasius had one of his festal letters listed all the books of the canon that we still use today.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know.
It's absolutely possible that I'm misinformed. The person that I had this conversation with is a priest down in Wilmington, and he had explained it to me as the concentric circles, and it just made sense to me. But I mean, I absolutely could be wrong about this. The point being that I wasn't worried about figuring it out anymore, though.
Gotcha.
I was just happy to be there. And I knew that even if I didn't know something, like right now, like maybe this entire time for a year and a half, I believed something that wasn't accurate, and now I'm starting to understand. And there's always evolutions in your understanding as an Orthodox Christian.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's ever going to stop. And once I accepted that, all of my questions, all of the intellectual, things that would hold me back from believing one thing over the other, ironically, that just didn't matter anymore. Because if you remember, when I first left the Catholic Church, I cited some, garbage reasons of like, oh, let the gays get married, let people get their abortions or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, I don't believe any of those things anymore. I believe everything the Orthodox Church teaches. So it was never about the doctrines. It was an excuse. It's like if you have a job and you're really trying to quit it, but you don't want to hurt your boss's feelings, you'd be like, oh, this is just not really where I'm meant to be right now in my career or whatever. Like you make up an excuse. Yeah. That's what I was doing. And when I came to the Orthodox Church, I didn't feel like I needed to do that.
So So at what point in your exploring of Orthodoxy, between your first encountering it and you're getting chrismated, when did you feel inspired to be like, what, this time I'm going to actually try and change my life? Like, when did that spark get lit in your heart?
I think once I became a catechumen, which was about 2 months after I first attended that parish, I was like, this is serious, right? Like, I have engaged, like my priest always says, you're now engaged to the church when you're a catechumen, like you're out. And if you, God forbid, if you were to pass away as a catechumen, you'd get a Christian burial. He always makes that point every time. And then it was serious for me. And at the time, I was cohabitating with a girl. Still, I became a catechumen, and I went and I saw my priest, and I said, Father, I'm cohabitating. And he said, okay. Explained to me the situation, and I explained it to him and everything. And it was actually really interesting. He said, what do you think you should do? I was like, oh, we can't do this. And he said, I agree with you. So he let me come to the conclusion myself, knowing that I wouldn't have brought it to him if I didn't already understand that this is not tenable.
Yeah.
So I had to do that.
Was this the girl you brought to Montana?
Yeah. So we're no longer together now, and you and I have talked about some of the events that transpired around that, and that is one thing I will not go into detail over. But yes, the relationship fell apart, but it was like when I was like, okay, well, one of us is gonna have to get a new apartment, so she ends up getting a new apartment, and then that was sort of conveniently the opportunity for her to do the things that she ended up doing. But yeah, so that relationship was sort of, I think, a remnant of my life that I sort of had dragged into the church, and then eventually wasn't serving me anymore. And those are the kinds of changes that you have to make when you become Orthodox. is the longer you live a life of degeneracy, the more painful it will be to extract the tumor, right? Like it has festered and festered and festered, and now you're like, oh, I'm sick. And the doctor, your priest, the church, the doctor says, yeah, and you've been sick for a while, and because you waited so long, you're at stage 4 now. You're at stage so-and-so. And now we're going to have to go. Like, if you would come in 3 years ago, we could have given you 2 weeks of chemo and you'd be fine. But because you're at stage 4 now, we're going to have to go in surgery and cut out a bunch of stuff.
And it's interesting. Oh, sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying it's painful.
It is. And I remember my journey first as a Protestant, and then I experienced the same thing you did, where I tried to reconcile it with my like Hermetic beliefs and occult beliefs, and not straddling that fence of Christianity and Gnosticism, which I did for a while.
Yeah.
But there were things in retrospect that were bad for me, bad for my soul, attachments, passions, relationships, that even if I had desired to let go of them, I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. And so God orchestrated these situations by which they ended up removing themselves from my life. Because God condescends to our weakness. He's like, okay, you know this is bad. I know you can't get rid of it. So I'm just gonna, push this away from you over here. So thank God. That was, the training wheels days, I think.
Yes.
It sounds like it was similar with this relationship that you had.
Yeah. I think that whatever we do, whatever trouble we get ourselves in, the Lord makes all things ultimately work for our salvation if we let him.
Amen.
So I was in a relationship that, even if I could have in some way salvaged, had so much trauma and toxicity around it, and had, over those 5 years, terrible things had happened, that I just don't think it wasn't for my salvation. I just don't think it was for my salvation or her salvation. Right? So sometimes it's best for people to part, and this happens.
Yeah.
And there's one of my all-time favorite quotes, St. Paisios. He says, the desire and the effort have to come from you, and God will provide the power and the results.
Amen.
So I like the way you said that, where God says, I know this is bad for you, but I know you can't do it by yourself, so I'm going to orchestrate things. Is you just want it. Like, God, please, I want to be saved, whatever that means. Oh, that's a dangerous prayer.
Yeah.
That is a dangerous prayer.
Yep.
And whatever is needed for my salvation, give it to me. He's going to, well, you asked for it. And it will, the medicine is bitter, my friend. It is bitter.
Yes. I've said a few times, the 4 scariest words in the English language are "Thy will be done." Amen.
My priest just changed my prayer rule to because I've been having trouble focusing on my prayer. So he said he substituted my nighttime prayer with the Lord's Prayer, but I have to say it over the course of like 5 to 10 minutes. So I have to meditate on every line. And so I'm like, Our Father. And then it's like 30 seconds of, what does that mean? Well, he cares for me. He gave birth to me in a manner of speaking. He made me, who art in heaven. Okay, so he is holy. He's up there. And then when I get to thy will be done, I have that thought that you just mentioned. It's like, ooh, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, do I really be one of praying this? And it's kind of beautiful that by the grace of God, you can say to yourself every night, yes, I do. I want to pray this, whatever it means.
It's really tough because sometimes, I try to say the Lord, I probably say it 3 times a day, I think, morning, midday, and evening prayers. And you get to thy will be done, or you're praying, Lord, please save me. And for me, I get all these like images in my head of, the martyrs, the Christians that were tortured for their faith. And like part of me wants to say like thy will be done, but not that. Like, let's be reasonable. But let's be reasonable. But then I feel bad about myself because I feel like I'm I won't use the word about to use. I feel like I'm being a coward or like not embracing it fully. So I have to remind myself, well, God knows, what we can handle and what's best for us. And even if it's beyond what we can handle, like the apostles say, it was beyond our strength to endure this, but God granted it. But it's always terrifying because you just don't know. It wasn't that long ago that Bolsheviks were rounding up and murdering Christians.
In the most horrible of ways, right? Like chopping up priests in front of their families and burying them alive, and just absolute atrocities. And yes, I think that those martyrs, those saints, had a quality I don't, right? Is that for me, it's hard enough to get over my ego and walk into a place and be like, yeah, I'm wrong about what I used to believe. And for these people, it's like breathing to do what God wants them to do. Like the level of faith of some of these martyrs is like, who's that? And this is a theme here, right? I always remember the story or the quote and never the name of the saint. I think it might be Saint Irenaeus, who said, like, don't stop me from my martyrdom. Is that right?
Ignatius of Antioch.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
close-ish.
Yeah. Remembering the story but not the name, that's how the saints would have wanted it anyway. So
yeah, that would be humility for them. That's why I do it. It's all intentional.
There you go.
So it's that I'm like, no. If it was me, I'd be like, guys, help, please. Like, they're trying to kill me. Like, help me.
Yeah.
But that's why they're saints, and I'm just a guy trying to, God willing, one day be one.
It's interesting. A lot of different saints have said, and I don't remember which one specifically, but I know I've seen it several times, that the fathers, the saints of old, were made of such different stuff than us that, like, we can't do their great deeds, we can't do their miracles and their wonderful things. But for people in the end times, when everyone's fallen away, including hierarchs and clergy, unfortunately, just maintaining your faith in Christ will be worth more to God than the great martyrdoms of old, just because the world has changed so much. The temptations have changed so much. Like think about this. Back in the first century, if you wanted to commit some sexual sin, you don't log onto the internet and 2 clicks later you have something. You got to, like, cross town, risk getting caught. You got to plan, how do I get to the brothel? Like, there was a serious effort involved. Right. So for them to not go to the brothel was not, as didn't take as much discipline as, like, just going on the internet.
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? So I think that's what they were talking about, where for us, just the very basics are worth so much to God because of the times we live in, where it's so easy to get. I can go down the street and buy drugs if I wanted.
I mean, legally now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You go to a dispensary and buy drugs.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to say, I don't know what it's like where you're at. Where I'm at, we don't have, like, marijuana, but we have. Okay, right. In North Carolina, we have Delta 8 and Delta 9 now,
which are.
Oh, it's apparently, I don't know a lot about it, but a friend of mine explained it to me, where, how hemp has, like, virtually no THC in it. Yeah. And basically what they do now is they take hemp and they, like, pull out all the tiny little bits of cannabinoids and they hyper concentrate it. And because it's a hemp byproduct, it's legal. So they have these in smoke shops and gas stations, Delta 8, Delta 9 gummies, and there's one called, like, THC 0 and stuff. So yeah, I can, after this call, I could close my laptop, walk to my gas station, it's walking distance, and be like, let me get some of those drugs right there, some of that alcohol, and let me get that nudie mag as well. And then I'm going to pull out my phone and, get on some dating app. They even have dating apps for, like, explicitly for promiscuity and adultery. Like, I forgot what it's called. It's, like, super old. Ashley Madison or something, I think it's called.
Yeah, I remember that one.
So yes, that's the age we're in, is you can snap your finger and you can have everything, all of it. I could go online right now and I could watch hours and hours of sexual content or people getting killed or all kinds of satanic depravity. And so I see the point you're making. The circumstances have changed a little bit for us, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I hope that we won't have to experience the tortures and imprisonment and martyrdom. But the way things are going, you never know. You just got to remind yourself, God makes all things work together for the good of those who believe. As Amen. Scary as that can be.
Amen.
So now you're Orthodox. When we talked to Montana, you were not making music at the time. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of actually very famous musicians who were once into Satanism or drugs and then became Christian later. So, for example, Victor Griffin, singer, guitarist for Pentagram, now is in a Christian doom metal band called Place of Skulls.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, in and out of jail, rough life. That guy had a rough life. Alice Cooper, devout
No
Christian.
way.
Yeah. Dave Mustaine from Megadeth, devout Christian. Brian Welch from Slipknot, devout Christian. These guys are all Protestants, to be fair.
Sure, but hey.
Step in the right direction. And I know that there are songs of theirs they will no longer play because their beliefs have changed so much. It's changed their relationship with their former music. How has that played out for you? Has that changed for you?
Okay, yeah. Getting into the meat of it. So now that we've sort of set the stage with all of the theological developments and beliefs and everything, now I think people are going to have at least a glimpse into what was going on in my head, where I want everyone to understand that I was making music pretty much this entire time. Like the whole thing that we talked about, this entire 9 to 10 year period, I would, make music under an artist name and it wasn't very good and I would delete it and then I would get a little better. And that kept happening until most recently, when I just started releasing music under Hara. I was like, I'm me, I'm Hara, like this is who I am. I'm just gonna release music. And I released a first record, and it was called 143. And
what is that a reference to, 143?
143 is, so the girl that I was with for about 5 years, one of the elements of our relationship was that we were always on again, off again, right? Always breaking up and getting back together. And she has like a connection to the number 143. It's such like I love you or something, and she always felt like it was God sending her message. Whenever she'd see the number 43 or 143, she'd be like, God is telling me I love you. So that sort of became like a vocabulary in our relationship, is that number was sort of significant. So one of the many, many times we broke up, and I'm sulking in my corner. I'm like, oh, I miss her so much. I'm gonna write an entire EP to confess my love. And so I did, and it was good. I made some good music, and I picked up steam for the first time ever.
Yeah, you've had a lot of plays on Spotify.
Yeah. So I'm approaching 1 million total streams on Spotify now. One of my top 3 most popular songs is called On the Low. Don't listen to it. Everyone hearing this, don't just listen to Salvation EP. Don't listen to any of the other stuff. It's all degenerate. But yeah, so this stuff started really picking up steam. And this was when I was like right in the middle of the Far Eastern occult phase, like right there. So some of the lyrics are references to Shiva, and I was a Shaivite, right? I was worshiping specifically that deity of Hinduism. And so I was making music over this entire time as my beliefs were changing. And then you can actually see through the music that at some point I started making references, rather than saying Shiva, I would start saying God. And then eventually I would say Jesus Christ. And then at one point I started sampling like Syriac Christian chanting and Arabic Christian chanting. And then some of my album covers would have like halos and things like that, which of course is absolutely blasphemous, but I didn't know at the time.
Right.
And towards the very end there, I hit critical mass. And it was right as I was converting to Orthodoxy, right as I became a catechumen. I look back at my catalog and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I can't, everything that I'm talking about, everything that I'm promoting, everything that I'm glorifying, this almost killed me. All the stuff I'm talking about and I'm telling people, and like it's like putting lipstick on a pig, right? It's like I'm packaging up nicely because I have a good voice and the mix is solid and everything, and the album cover is pretty, so people are like, oh, this is really good, and they're singing the lyrics. And speaking of manifesting or whatever, is that like you're really starting to, it's entering your brain, it's entering your spirit and your soul. So I came to the realization, I can't do this, but I know I'm a musician. I'm an artist at my core. That's one thing that I've always been, is that beauty, I think, my favorite Dostoevsky quote, beauty will save the world, right? I think beauty is just, it's something that we can all get behind. And I'm not saying like beauty as in, I see a beautiful woman, like not attraction. I'm saying there's beauty in so many things, right? There's beauty in, I held a baby at church like 3 weeks ago, a parent's like, running after one child, she like just hands me one, it's like, take her. And so here I am, and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do with her? Like, I don't know what to do. Starts like tugging on my beard and stuff. And everyone came up to me after liturgy and they were making jokes about it. And like, I didn't know you were a baby whisperer. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this thing. Like, please take it back. But it was a beautiful experience. It felt so good to be just holding this innocent creature for now uncorrupted by the world. And so like beauty like that. And I think that can be found in visual art, in music. And this is one thing that I disagree with a lot of other very traditional people, is I don't think that the artistic vocabulary is as limited as they think it is. And I think that's one thing that you and I have in common, is that some people will say, you can't make hip hop music that's beautiful. You can't make metal music that's beautiful. I think that's wrong. I think that there's nothing inherently in the kick drum, the snare drum, the synthesizer, the distorted guitar. There's nothing in that vocabulary, that tool set, that makes it satanic. It is what is the statement I'm trying to make with it. Because like basically if you're saying that I can make beautiful music that's classical, but I can't make beautiful music that's hip hop, what you're saying is I can preach the gospel in English but not in French.
Mm.
And we know that that's not true. I mean, read the Acts, right? Speaking in tongues, like these, for all the foreign languages, I can preach the gospel to you in every language. And music and visual art, these are artistic languages.
Mm.
So I had to figure that out. And that was one of the things when we were at Montanica. The first one is, I think I asked Father Deacon Ananias, I asked him, I was like, what is the role of artists and musicians in the Orthodox? Like, what are we supposed to do? Because like, I'm not a classical composer. I don't make liturgical music. Those are not my skill sets. Do I just drop it? And then, you know, I had a lot of great conversations with people afterwards. You and I had this really long conversation talking about what does it mean to baptize a genre and everything. And I had to figure that out. And one of the conclusions I eventually came to was, I'm not an Orthodox artist. I'm an artist who is Orthodox. And that's not meant to be a play on words. I'm trying to say something explicit here in that my music isn't like gospel music or worship music, right? Where they're like singing about this is the story of Christ or this is how he saved me and everything. I'm a musician and the core part of my identity is that I'm Orthodox. So everything I say in my music will come from that perspective. And I think that was ultimately the formula I landed on. And a big part of me figuring out that formula was rereading the Psalms. And like, oh, David can lament to God and say, why am I suffering? Why are these people persecuting me? Can't you see how bad it hurts? God, I need your help. Now, everything that I just said, all those first things, like, why am I suffering? Why does it hurt so bad? Why are these people persecuting me? All of that, that was kind of the music I used to make. Plus, you know, promoting sexuality, drug use, and using profanity. But if you take away, that's step zero for me. That's small tangent. If you want to make artists as an Orthodox musician, no profanity, no degeneracy, don't promote anything that you shouldn't be promoting. But then, whatever your emotional state is, whatever it is that you want to communicate, that's okay. Because if David can shake his fist in God and say, I need your help, this hurts. If David can do that, we can do that. And that's essentially what Salvation EP ended up being. The chorus for Salvation is, I need someone to come save me from myself. Praying to my God, I'm going ADICL. But so basically, that song on the record was the realization that I need salvation, because that's step one. Is that everyone on his journey, his or her journey to orthodoxy, says, oh, like I was just trying to find a religious community, or I was just interested in theology, but ultimately somewhere along the road, I realized that's not what this is about. This is about me needing to be saved, and there is a savior, and this is the vehicle of my salvation.
Amen.
So over a year and a half, I figured out how to make melodic hip hop without it being what I would deem cheesy. So I didn't want to be a Christian rapper. And we're like, oh, like Jesus came to save you from your sins. Like it's not me. It's just...
I've heard those songs actually.
Okay, well, so you know. It's not me. And listen, more power to the guys that can spread the gospel that way. If that is your alley and that's your niche, more power to you. It's not mine. My niche was, these are the emotions that I've struggled with in the past, and they are what led me to the realization that I need God. And then this is how God has made changes in my life. So there is actually, the record isn't in chronological order. It is out of order, but I could put them in chronological order and you could see the progression of how is my mental state changing from, like, let's say Visions of Hell, where the pre-chorus, the line is, I'm not alive, right? There is no life in me without Christ. So the pre-chorus, I say, I'm not alive. And then the chorus, the first line is, I saw these demons. So this realization that, and this was from like the song is set in the peak degenerate days, and me realizing that this is wrong. I'm having demonic experiences. I'm not actually alive as a human being because I don't have a relationship with God. And then you can progress from that to Salvation, the title track, where I recognize I need salvation. I need God to help me, and the cognitive dissonance that accompanies that realization, right? Where the chorus, or after the first chorus, the verse starts with, same time, one a band, one a God. And one of the hallmarks of my songwriting now is I still use all of the same verbiages that people are used to from hip hop music. So I'll use phrases like, I'll talk about Hennessy, I'll talk about bands, money, and like I'll use all the same words and contextualize them from an Orthodox point of view. So I came to the realization that I was having this cognitive dissonance where I want to be famous and successful and I want women and everything, but I'm realizing that I want God also. And what does that mean? And then you can go from that to MIA, which is a song that I wrote about the relationship that I'm in currently with a girl I met at church, and we've been dating for about 10 months or so, and how that's so much healthier than any relationship I was in before I was Orthodox. So she's Orthodox, I'm Orthodox, and the song it's highly metaphorical. Like the whole thing is told from the perspective of like driving a car and like stealing her away from her parents so we can go and hang out and have like get to know each other, because that's how we met, was at her sister's wedding. And so like we're talking and everything. I'm like, the wedding's done. I'm like, what are you about to do? And she's like, oh, we're gonna go hang out and eat pizza. I was like, forget that. Let's you and I go hang out and get some food and go on a walk and get to know each other. So she went. She asked her, her family's like, it was okay if I go hang out with Hara, and they were like, yeah, that's totally fine. Just come back at such and such a time. So we left, we hung out, went on a date, and I dropped her back off with her parents. And what difference it makes when you start dating in a godly way. And the amount of pressure that used to be there, it's like, oh, when am I going to get into this girl's pants? And when am I going to be able to brag to my friends, I got another notch in my belt, to just, can't I just spend time with someone who is Orthodox, God-fearing, and also I find beautiful, and just, do that. And it's so much better. So the whole EP sort of tells different stages of what it means to make music, at least for me, as someone who used to be in a terrible, terrible space, theologically and mentally and all of those things, to learning to heal through the church, which my priest always says the church is a spiritual hospital.
Amen. Now, you talk about using the verbiage from hip hop, and you're talking about speaking a language, right? Preaching the gospel in all languages. It reminds me of, I'm glad your cat has joined us on the stream. You always love to see that. There's a verse that St. Paul uses, I forget which epistle it's in, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's the right idea. To the Jews I became a Jew, to the Greeks I became a Greek, so that by all possible, becoming everything to everyone, so that by all possible means I might save some. Now what's he saying? He's saying, I speak to people in the language they understand, I think with cultural references that make sense to them. Like when you're preaching to Jews about Christianity, you're not going to talk about the Greek pantheon. You're going to talk about how Christ is prophesied in the prophets, right? With the book they're used to. When you're preaching to Greeks, you can talk about the Logos and how Christ is the fulfillment of this concept they already have. So I think I'm agreeing with what you're saying, that you speak, it's just effective communication to speak to people, to your audience, in a way they understand. Like if you were trying to bring hip hop fans into Orthodoxy, sending them classical music would probably not make that much sense, depending on who they are, of course, but as a general trend. So I agree with what you're saying. We have several Orthodox priests who are musicians, who are metal musicians, believe it or not.
Yep.
Have you seen Father Turbo Qualls in his videos?
Who?
Father Turbo Qualls, have you seen any of his videos?
Yeah.
He's a one-man metal band. I don't know if you knew that. He's a guitar player and musician.
Didn't know that, no.
And he's got some really great stuff on the occult and the difference between magic and miracles and stuff that appeals to people like you and me. But I've listened to this album of yours, Salvation. I'm so glad that's what the title is, because it's Salvation with no vowels, and I thought it was something else. I was like, I'm gonna have to cancel the interview
rolling
now.
When you said that to me, I was like, Lord have mercy, I messed up. I didn't see that when I put it together. But yeah, so for everyone who's listening, it's pronounced salvation. It's stylized without the vowels. It doesn't mean anything else you think it might mean. It means salvation.
It's like, how do I even bring this up? Like, did I make a mistake? Did I read this guy wrong? I really like the album, especially the title track. I mean, I was listening to it in the car and at work. I mean, it's really good, because when you say, I need someone to save me from myself, like there's actually a lot of theological content there, right? We're recognizing God as a person, not this abstraction, not this dead concept. It's a who, right?
Yeah.
Our Father who art in heaven. It's a person we're talking about here, or three persons rather. Save me from myself. This humility. I can't do this. I know I need to be saved. My own power, my own will does not get me anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like the style of music too, which I have been unable to listen to since I became Orthodox. So thank you for filling that musical void. Where can people find all your stuff? And I'm going to have all your links down in the box below. But for people listening, if they want to go check it out, where can they find you? What platforms are you on?
Well, I'm on every major platform, so Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Google Play, all of them. I don't focus on any of the platforms except Spotify. So if you try to find me on, let's say, like Deezer, you might have to do a little bit of like search bar trickery and maybe search Hara and then what are the song titles or the album name and stuff. If you go to my Instagram, which is XXLHara, in the bio, I have a link splitter, so it'll like send you to all the different platforms if you want to find the link that way. The reason I focus mostly on Spotify is because as an independent artist, you have to try to make waves before you can start to diversify. So like it's about focus. So that's why I focus on Spotify as a platform. But yeah, I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple Music, and like you said, those links will be provided for anyone who wants to check it out. I'm also relatively active on Instagram, where I always post song previews on my story, and whenever songs get completed, I announce it there first. So if you want to come hang out, send me a message. I always respond. I respond to everybody. I get, I want to say, maybe like 10 to 15 messages from people a day who find my music through various playlists and the advertisements that I run and everything all over the world, right? I have ironically, a large fan base in India, but all over the world. We're talking about Arab countries and Morocco and Germany and Spain and whatever. So yeah, please feel free to send me a message, and I'm happy to chat with anybody about whatever. So yeah, those links will Brother Augustine will provide to all of you guys to take a listen at your leisure.
Yes, and I recommend that you do listen to it, especially if you're into that kind of music. It's quite good, and it's Orthodox, so you can't lose. So just in closing here, if there's anyone listening who is maybe familiar with your old stuff or who is currently in a lifestyle of fornication and drugs, what would you say to those people?
I'll sum it up like this. You sit down by yourself, you close the door, you turn off your phone, and you just ask yourself, I said this before in the conversation, I'll say it again, honestly, really honestly, because this isn't about me. I will not be impacted by what you do in your life. This is about you, your salvation, your relationship with God. I want you to ask yourself, is this working for me? Like when I pursue these women, or when I practice the occult, or whatever it is, whatever your sin of choice is, and it is a choice, whatever your sin of choice is, I want you to ask yourself, is this working for me? And if the answer is yes, call me an idiot, turn this off, and go about your day. But something tells me that the answer will be no. Something tells me that people who are in that lifestyle, same as I was, same as you were, it is not life-giving. And to quote the pre-chorus from Visions of Hell, I'm not alive. You're not alive when you're living these things. St. Paul says, it is not I who live, it is Christ who lives within me. So if you want to have true life, Gospel of John, I am the way and the truth and the life, right? If you want to experience true life, you have to step away from the lies that the devil has told you through his various vehicles, right? Through people unknowingly or knowingly promoting satanic beliefs and views, through the culture in general, through whatever it is, your own, missteps intellectually or emotionally or whatever. So if you're a musician, you don't have to make that kind of music. I did it. Salvation was received unanimously, positively by all of my fans who know all of my old music, right? I have people sending me messages, you're like, you're still great, this is awesome still, and what is that cross on the album cover, right? So you don't have to make music that isn't true to you. But if you are on your way to becoming Orthodox or Christian, or on your way away from a degenerate lifestyle, you're going to start experiencing cognitive dissonance. And you're going to start feeling the tug is that this is the kind of music I make, but this is the kind of person I am. Don't let the music win, let the person win. And
Amen.
I think I'll leave it at that.
Well said. Well, thank you for joining us today, for telling us your story and for being so open about it. not everyone is open about their past and their sins, but I think it really resonates with people because it makes them feel like they're not alone. Like, oh, I thought I was the only one dealing with all these problems. Not only is it not true, but there's a way out of it. So I really appreciate that you came and hopefully helped contribute to someone feeling that resonance and finding their way to God.
It was absolutely my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. Like, since we met more than a year ago, it's like, I'm going to finish this record. I'm going to send it to Michael. We're going to get on the show. Like, this has been a huge motivating factor for me. I'm just, beyond grateful that, all of the mistakes and the suffering that we all go through, it doesn't have to be for nothing. And that I'm able to sort of be a cautionary tale to some other people who might be considering things of that nature. But no, thank you. It really was my pleasure and my honor to be here.
Well, glory to God for all things. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I wish you all a blessed day and a wonderful weekend.